So before I begin, our case does mention sexism and a very a
non-graphic sexual assault.
Yeah. So I'm going to put my phone number in the chat, and if any of you have an issue with that, could you please text me? And it'll be anonymous since I don't have any of your numbers. Okay, I didn't get any texts, so if everyone is good to go, then time shall start my first word.
It's just gonna be
Wait, are y'all sending a doc?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get a doc.
Oh, okay.
I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, cool.
But would you mind sending it on the email? Because we'd rather have like a permanent version of it.
Sure.
Thanks.
Also, it says access denied anyway.
Oh, okay.
You might not have shown late viewing on Sanj.
Let me do that. Okay. See if you have access now, and then someone can just put the link in the email chain if that's fine. Let me know when y'all got it, and I can start then.
Yeah, the email isn't coming yet.
That's okay. Okay, just let me know when you do.
I mean, it's the same link as in the chat, so.
Oh yeah, the email came in.
Okay, sounds good. Then if everyone is ready, time shall begin on my first word. He put his hands on her, and when she had the audacity to shove him away, the world was angry with her. How dare she refuse? She was walking and talking, but that didn't make her her own. He was simply taking what she decided was his. They didn't care that she didn't want it, that his hands felt like sandpaper on her skin, that they heard her say no, knew she wanted to go, but they didn't care. They just didn't care. She fell into herself deeply, tried to wash him away, but the scent, the feel of him lingered, and their words were stuck in her head. When she had had enough, she'd stood up, stood tall. This wasn't her fault. She didn't ask for this. She wasn't anyone's property, and it was time that everyone knew it. By Laura Martin. Part 1 is the framing. The debate space is structurally skewed against women. Only 5 out of 44 TOC elimination round qualifiers were women with no girl-go teams. Good to and need 20. Debate is used to embarrass people and make them feel inferior. She has been objectified by members of the debate. When she was 16, 2 male debaters called her a temptress and joked about sex. It was like my body wasn't my own. Female debaters are twice as likely to be called up for aggression, and if this happens, much more likely to lose. In the case of sexist acts, women are seen as the problem because they call out the problem. I'm at 17. When you expose a problem, you pose a problem. The problem would go if you would just stop talking. Her story is heard as a sensationalist, as if exaggerated for effect. Feminist killjoy is getting in the way of something. Feminism is dismissed as a personal tendency. If she disagrees with something, she is being disagreeable. Through feminism, you make a sense of wrongs. You realize that you are not wrong. The act is a form of liberation that kills the patriarchal joy in debate. Calling out the misogyny when we are constantly silenced is the first step. Ahmed 10. Feminists speak out about their unhappiness. Feminism is a history of women who refuse to make others happy. To speak is a form of defiance if you are supposed to recede into the background. My bridge in this debate is an act of killjoy necessary to defeat patriarchal structures and provide women a method of resistance. Clapel 73. A woman is denied her healthy anger. Healthy anger says, I have human rights. If you deprive me of my rights, I'm not going to say thank you. I'm going to say fuck off. The traditional woman is the opposite. Society clings to this model because anger takes a woman out of her mother roles. Anger gives you the sense of self and self-worth. You can get angry and the world doesn't fall apart. Anger becomes a tool which you can control. Thus, the role of the ballot is to vote for the debater who better performatively and methodologically provides a resistance strategy for the oppressed. Vincent 13. It is no longer enough to vote for the flow. We must evaluate the Speech Act. We have an obligation to foster education. We do not live in a vacuum. Debate and must allow a multitude of models of engagement and not one limited to the constitutive claim Cone and NIME 815. The question should not be what is debate. The question is what can debate do? The constitutive feature, the possibility of what it can do. Students have the ability to speak their truths and have real conversation. If the rules of debate do not allow for that, we advocate for breaking those rules. We isolate 3 impacts. 1, collectivization. The killjoy allows us to connect and heal to cope with our exhaustion. Ahmed 14. When you are not supposed to live as you are, survival is radical action. Self-care becomes warfare. It is about finding ways to exist in a world that is diminishing. There's a system which supports him. To challenge him is to challenge the system. We are the ones who appear individualistic while he appears into a collective, and refusing to support him, we have become self-willed. Self-care is about the creation of community, assembled out of the experience of being shattered. We have to insist we matter. Second is defiance. Our speeches act as a pre-fiat form of disruption in a space where women are suppressed through justification of conformity and acting heavy with the detached rhetoric of debate is a game. This performance combats misogyny and kills joy. Third is spillover into the real world. Debates are a part of the real world. If killjoy changes their behavior inbound, that translates into society. Poland 12. The training my participants discuss is not the abstract. It is training for the real world, for their own empowerment, and that of their communities. Underview. Censorship is an act of patriarchal silencing in the debate space. It recreates the same violence that the female body is constantly subjugated to. Mojab 2. When one barrier is removed, other emerge to reproduce the status quo. State-centered politics continue to be male-centered. Censorship is an integral exercise of gender power. Deny women access to information, limits their participation in the creation of knowledge, and denies power to utilize knowledge. Sublet censorship is denying feminist knowledge in the exercise of power. Challenging patriarchy means defying one's traditions. If they want to read tea or respond to the role of the ballot in the constructive, otherwise it creates a time skew for us. Summary isn't long enough for us to extend the K and defend a non-topical position.
We'll take some prep. We'll raise our hand to indicate when we're starting. That was 1:25 used.
Okay, the order's 2 off. Then the K, the roll of the
Can
ballot,
I
and
get
the
a
interview.
speech doc?
I can give you the one shell I have on paper, but everything else is extended.
Okay, sure. Okay, I'll let you
I'm
know
sending it
when
in the
I
chain
get.
now.
Are both offs?
Yeah, both Esther theory.
I still haven't gotten it.
Yeah, I've sent it out. Just let me know when you get it. I got it.
Okay.
Cool. Am I good to go? Cool. First off, the interpretation debaters must, on a page on the NDC PF 2020-2021 wiki with their name and the school that they attend, disclose the taglines, full citations, and full text of the card of any pieces of evidence that they have read. In the case violation, they have not disclosed standards versus argument, quality 3 internal links versus 4 knowledge. A world without disclosure rewards debaters for running arguments, not because they're good, because their opponents won't know how to respond. Disclosure forces debaters to commit to quality. Under my interpretation, debaters would have to write cases knowing that their opponents will have the opportunity for thoughtful preparation. Second is cross-pollination. Debaters could use and modify the best ideas from each other's wikis, ultimately leading to the best development of the best version of the argument. Argument quality is a voter, because debate is a unique space where we need to have in-depth education about important issues. Third, especially in terms of method v method K debates, especially in PF where it's extremely unpredictable, disclosure is key for teams to be able to interact, develop competing methods, and then decide what the best method to solve the impact is. The second, standards inclusion, 2 internal links versus Intel. Otherwise, schools with big programs who have more students and judges and better connected with will scout more rounds and have more flows. Disclosure equalizes the Intel disparity. Second is research. Disclosure forces big wealthy programs to put their prep on the wiki. That means that everyone has access to the best paywalled evidence and also keeps smaller programs up to date on the meta. Third is evidence ethics. Disclosure allows debaters to check the other's evidence before the round instead of needing us to use the prep to do so, meaning it's easier to find and harder to run misconstrued evidence. Voters. First is education. It's the reason schools fund the activity, the only portable skill of debate. Second is inclusion. It prevents teams from accessing any benefit of debate in the first place. Third is evidence ethics. Misconstruing evidence is academic dishonesty and prevents actual engagement of the literature. Drop the debater. 2 reasons. First, no difference is the same thing as dropping the argument, since the argument is the entire case that wasn't disclosed. Second is norm setting. Voting for us sets a precedent in favor for a positive model debate. Wins and losses determine the direction of the activity. Competing interpretations. 2 reasons. First is no difference. Debaters or judges insert an arbitrary standard to determine bright line to reasonability, or else we'll debate over what the bright line is, which collapses to competing interpretations. That's good. The second off. Interpretation. Debaters must only derive offense off the hypothetical implementation of the plan. First, standards limits. Their model of debate explodes limits and makes debate a question of oppression Olympics, i.e. every affirmative or negative team will just bring up a form of oppression and how they break it in debate. We'd be debating about racism versus sexism, and that has an independent impact of psychological violence. Under their model, debates would devolve into, oh, I said racism first, I said sexism first, which is worse, which team should we vote for? That independently causes psychological violence and outweighs. Second is ground. Under their model debate, especially when they've not disclosed, there is no ground for negative debaters. It's impossible to impact turn their argument, and it's impossible to cut methods in 3 minutes of prep time because their argument is unpredictable. Second is a topical version of the affirmative. They can defend hypothetical implementation of plan and make an argument about how NATO helps combat feminism, helps combat sexism in other places around the world. Fourth is switch side debate. They could have read the K. They could have read the K on the negative, which solves all their offense. Then on the K proper first, and then a pick. Your ballot should be, we agree with the performance of the affirmative, but vote negative. Net benefits first is commodification. Under their model debate, every team, boy or girl or any other gender, would just basically come up and read feminism, sexism, even if they don't believe in the issue, just to win rounds. And that would just devolve and destroy their method, because teams would no longer do it to for the issue itself, but then do it just to win rounds. And on the roll, the ballot A, it's self-serving, and it's impossible for us to compete under it because we can't predict their offense because it wasn't disclosed and it isn't topical. Second, and then on the under V1, we aren't saying that you can't speak up and do things, but we think you should have disclosed it before the round. It further proves it, because if you disclosed it, then more people would have seen it and more people would have been able to interact with it. The biggest thing is the fact that they said time skew concedes fairness as a prior impact. The fact that they said we had to respond in second constructive shows that fairness is a prior impact. Time skew and things like able to have clash is what determines participation in debate. You should hold participation in fairness as a prior to all their K impacts. If people can't, if debate is unfair, they read unpredictable arguments and don't disclose, then people won't participate in the activity, which short circuits their method, because if there's no one in debate in the first place, and they can't use this as a platform to point things out like sexism, which means we are a prior question. Hold them to fairness is the most important impact. The last sentence of their underview is basically they have to respond, because time skew would mean we can't engage with arguments and clash. That inherently concedes that fairness is a prior impact. You have to vote on fairness on either of the theory shells before you can consider the impacts of the K, and don't let them weigh the K against the shells.
Okay, ready for toss?
Yeah.
1 second. My phone is about to die, so I'm gonna go get a charger real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, sorry. Toss?
Yeah.
Okay. So how would we be commodifying feminism, Kay, if we ourselves are the ones that are like facing these issues?
Yeah, no, we're not saying that you commodify it, but our argument is rather your model of debate where a team points out an issue and says that because we spoke about this issue will rupture and destroy the form of like violence that happens in debate, and because we did that, we should win. Creates a model of debate where any team with it doesn't matter, like any team in the future will just read these arguments to win rounds, not caring about the actual method, not caring about all the like benefits of the argument itself.
Right. So like, how does like us two women running this argument encourage other men who don't actually care about the
Because
issue?
it sets a precedent that you can break new critiques in double octos of a national tournament just to win a round. I know you're not doing it for that, but it sets a precedent that is possible, which encourages other debaters to do the same thing.
Right.
But our argument is that our counterplan solves all of your offense because it still ruptures debate, it still agrees with your performance, but prevents commodification in future rounds because it signals that you cannot just read these arguments to win rounds.
How does it prevent commodification if someone is like reading like feminism through the lens of the topic?
Well, if you agree to the TVA, then I guess it's possibly fine. But like if you don't, then
I mean,
it's
yeah,
still
I'm not going to agree to that because like we obviously don't like, we think that it's better to do it through a non-topical lens, which Sana will explain in her speech. But I would tell you that it's not actually encouraging commodification. What it's saying is that if you have an issue that you care about that specifically affects you, then we're setting a norm that you can win it if it does affect you, if it's something that you are dealing with. But if some other man was running this, for example, and they won, then maybe that would set the precedent for commodification. But since we are running it as people who deal with this issue, it's setting the norm that you can win these rounds if you truly believe about it and if you actually are willing to put the research into it and do the work for it. And we tell you that even if people are running it later on, them doing the research into finding all the evidence for it is allowing them to get more like educational value out of learning about feminism and things like that, which turns more people into being knowledgeable citizens of society and actually like being able to like combat these sexist forces outside of debate. But sure, you can have a question.
Okay, I want to respond to that, right? A couple of things. First, if this is about people doing research, learning about feminism, then that supercharges their disclosure shell because it means that we should have been able to have a method B, method K debate. Two, this argument isn't about a utopian form of debate. I agree that if debate was a perfect world, people would like develop answers, they would cut cards about feminism, but how debate works, people will control C, control V, the AFDOC, read it in a new round when they do not care about the issue. Like debate isn't a utopian world where people are like, oh, I really want to learn about this issue. Your like last two lines of the underview concede that the incentive to win and fairness is a prior impact to any other thing.
It's not the incentive to win that's what's making us run this or anything that fairness outweighs it. What our last thing was telling you is that you just need to respond to it in the next speech so that we can have proper discourse about it. It wasn't saying
which proves that having proper discourse and clash about an argument is good. That's our argument.
I'm not going to tell you that having a discourse about an issue is bad. That's why we're running this argument. But we tell you that we provide good discourse about this issue by bringing it up in the first place, as we wouldn't be having this debate without us bringing it up. But that's cross.
Cool.
We're going to take prep time. Okay, that was a minute. So the order is going to be on the K and then on the shells. Give me a second to pull up my doc. Okay, is everyone good? Okay, time will begin on my first word. First, you can extend the K. Get it you when you find that debate is structurally skewed against women, and Ahmed finds that every time we speak up against it, that's a form of liberation. Specifically, Kaplan finds that Killjoy is a form of defiance that allows for collectivization, defiance, and allows us to help implement our actions better in the real world. You can extend the role of the ballot. Specifically, the role of the ballot is to vote for the debater who better performatively and methodologically provides a resistance strategy for the oppressed. We are the only team that does this. They don't mention anything at all, and they don't really directly respond to the role of the ballot, so we are the only team that's under it. Let's line by line their responses. First, they talk about commodification, but I'd say first they tell you that we should talk about feminism through the topic lens. The commodification still allows that still like flows there, but then second, there is no way to confirm commodification. At what point do you determine that no one reading feminism is better than some people reading feminism because they might be commodifying? It's better to give people the benefit of the doubt. Specifically, Sanjay and I aren't commodifying in this round. We always run fem arguments. You can look at our disclosure page from last year. Then they tell us that the role of the ballot is self-serving, but it's not self-serving because specifically when we run fem, that helps other women in debate because of our collectivization impact. And the reason why we ran fem is because we saw other teams that ran fem at UK, and that is what caused us to run fem. The same thing applies here. On the bottom, they say that we should disclose, but this is the first time that we read FemK at this tournament, so there's no reason for us to disclose. We disclosed it when we ran it last year. You can check our wiki from last year. But then second is that many teams, for example, don't like to disclose their case. For example, and many teams don't like to disclose queer case because they don't want to get outed and they don't want to receive hatred from the community because there's a lot of hatred against teams running K. This is a turn on to accessibility. But then they tell you that at times you concedes fairness and clash. But I'd say that our K broadly talking about feminism is about structural fairness, and structural fairness is more important than procedural fairness in this one round because as women, Sanjay and I are structurally disfavored, but then the time skew and fairness only applies to this one round as procedural. With that, let's go on to the disclosure shell. Let's start on the counter-interpretation. Counter-interpretation, debaters with only one team in the pool from the school don't need to disclose. We're the only Northview team in the school. Standards, one small schools. We're a small school. We don't need to disclose because we don't have that much prep in the first place. So it hurts us when other teams steal our prep. And also small schools more broadly aren't aware of the wiki. When Sanjay and I started debate, I know that we didn't know about the wiki, and disclosure was exclusive for us. This is a direct turn onto their inclusion voter. But then second is prep outs because especially in elims at national tournaments, disclosing on the wiki encourages prep outs, and this can overwhelm small schools because they can't compete with bigger schools like Marist and Blake that have 10 coaches in the back of the room writing prep outs for them. But then third is exclusivity because again, like I mentioned, many people don't know about the wiki, and the wiki is horribly formatted. Like we run into tech issues so many times before us where we aren't physically able to disclose. I'd argue that us sending them speech doc before the round solves for them. The impact is accessibility because when small schools are excluded from the debate because they don't know about the wiki, they can't participate in it, or they physically aren't able to disclose on the wiki because they don't know about it. That cuts them up from debate and stops them from participating in a debate. With that, let's line by line their disclosure shell really quickly. They talk about argument quality because of foreknowledge and cross-pollination, but I'd say that one, this encourages lazy ethics because I can just control V, whatever the opponent's right. They literally say that people do this with FemK. The same thing can happen with topical arguments, and this it actually worsens the quality of the debate because teams don't know what they're running. Then they talk about inclusion, but I say one, you can cross-apply what I already said about prep outs. Prep outs are not worse because when teams constantly lose because Blake cut 10 prep outs for all their kids, it discourages them from participating in the activity. Two, you turn it again because small schools, like I mentioned, literally don't know about the wiki. But then third, you can turn it again because many people, like I mentioned before, who run Ks don't want to disclose because they don't want to receive hatred from the debate community because Prague is commonly looked down upon in the debate community on evidence ethics. I'd say that people still I've had rounds where people literally clip cards and put it on the wiki anyway. It doesn't really solve, especially because people can paraphrase and round. I'd say that us reading cut cards and sending them the cut cards before the round has the same impact. Let's go on to the topicality. First, you can follow the counter-interpretation. The debate should be structured around discourse and who best forms structures to resist suppressions. We meet one, that there are two standards. One, access. Debate as is accessible to many debaters, such as Sanjay and myself in this round, in rounds because it's structurally inequitable. This literally makes it impossible for Sanjay and I to be heard. And we're always talked over by male opponents. We must address these core issues of inequality before we can have an accessible debate, an educational round that accepts all perspectives. But second is on real-world implications. Our goal as a part of debate is to advocate for marginalized communities. It doesn't matter how we achieve that goal insofar as we learn about structures of oppression. I'd say that us learning about debate and learning how to advocate for feminism is the best. The voters are one, accessibility, and two, applicability. This is also prereq to their case because, okay, that's fine.
Okay, we'll run some prep. We have a minute 35 left. I'll raise my hand again.
Yeah.
Cool. I was talking this entire time. I wasn't prepping. I stopped prep at a minute 13 used, so we have 23 seconds left. Sorry, or 22. Yeah. Sorry, we're still getting used to like debating together. All right. The order is going to be really quickly on the disclosure shell, then then the underview, then the ballot pick, and then T. I can repeat the order if anyone wants.
Is the ballot pick the role of the ballot?
This is stuff that we read on the K. I'll signpost. Yeah, it's like modification stuff. Cool. Everyone good? Really quickly on disclosure, they have conceded no RBIs, which means that they can't win off the counter interpretation. No offense here, voters conceded. Then let's go to the K proper. On the underview, they say that structural fairness comes before procedural fairness. No, they literally consider that procedural fairness comes first when they said that we had to respond to the roll of the ballot because otherwise it would time skew them. Obviously, they can't solve back for all types of structural fairness. Things like sexism and racism, they can't solve back for. But they read warrants for procedural fairness comes first, which means that you hold fairness at a higher ground. It comes before all the other impacts. If we win a single link into inclusion, it proves that we win the round because that's what drives participation and the activity. And the only reason why their KF would ever work is if there's a debate ground and if there's people to actually talk to and actually advocate for your KF for. And if there's no people and there's no participation because they're like their model is inherently like not inclusive, then we win the round because we're winning a link as to a debate itself won't function because schools wouldn't fund the activity and people wouldn't go into the activity in the first place. Like this like whole argument about how like we had to respond just takes out their case because if we're winning a link to inclusion, they just like the KF doesn't matter. On T. It is game over. The TVA, the topical version of the app, was 100% conceded. Draw the line there. Don't give them any new responses. Even then, any new dishash to the TVA still prove that there's ground for their KF, which means that it's still bad for them. Even then, extended. We see that NATO, they could have just discussed NATO, like things on like sexual trafficking or how NATO troops promote things like human trafficking and sexual trafficking, or how NATO takes steps to solve back sexism within their offices or in the battlefields, which means that there was definitely topical ground for them to use and like read like a topical constructive on. The net benefit, though, is that when you don't read a topical app, you explode limits. They concede that this magnifies the psychological damage that they talk about because if limits are exploded and people can just come and say that, hey, I talked about racism, but I talked about racism before you talked about sexism, that just explodes limits because now it just becomes a racially bottom as to who can bring up their oppression or make up oppression first, which just explodes limits and causes even more psychological damage. Their counter interpretation literally doesn't matter insofar as we're winning that the TVA solves back for all of them. You can still access it and you can still be a small school and you can still advocate for marginalized communities all while being topical. And the net benefit is that you can make other people you can allow other people to engage in your case. That's the link into inclusion. As long as you're being topical, Amog and I, who have spent months prepping this topic, can engage in your KF. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to. And their model of debate encourages that type of model too. If they go into future rounds where people are clueless as to what a KF is in the first place or what they're actually advocating for, then having topic knowledge is useless, which is again what drives participation and the activity. People would just quit debate, which means that they wouldn't have a place to actually advocate for their KF for, which means that they can't get any of the role of the ballot or any of the change that they talk about. We're winning a clean link into inclusion. You should draw the line. The TVA was 100% conceded. Even then, they also conceded switch by debate. You can just go on the neg, and that solves back for all your offense because you can still advocate it for there. The ballot pick. Pick text and Dorsey methods of the app, but vote negative. They have dropped the ballot pick. It solves 100% of their offense because they have no reason as to why the ballot, if the ballot is key. A 1% risk of the commodification outweighs. Under our pick, no one can commodify because the ballot literally says that, hey, you've lost the round, but it still encourages the method. If people are losing rounds, even if they're reading chaos, and they won't do it anymore, which is what solves back for commodification. Their only response is super blippy. They just say, what is commodification? We should just give them the benefit of the doubt. If people are just starting to read a bunch of like stuff about like sexism and racism when it obviously doesn't affect them, when males are reading stuff about sexism, then you would know that that's probably the bright line for commodification. Even then, we shouldn't let them get away with the benefit of the doubt because a risk of psychological damage, like compounding, definitely outweighs the benefit of the doubt. You should draw the line there. Do not let people commodify people's oppressions that are real. Look, we're not denying any of what they have said. They had the right intentions to read this. We just believe that they did it in the wrong manner. They conceded the TVA. They could have read this in a topical version. They could have advocated for sexism and for women in terms of arguments like sexual trafficking, human trafficking, or sexism that occurs in NATO offices. Anything other than that explodes limits. It causes people to just not being able to engage, which links in conclusion. Also, really quickly on the role of the ballot, it's self-serving because they have conceded that fairness is a prior impact because it drives participation. If we're not able to engage into the role of the ballot because again they haven't read a topical version, then it proves that people just quit debate, no participation. Like there's like so many different links into fairness and inclusion. Like it's over.
Okay, ready for class?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, so no, do you want to run
We'll do it
before
after.
class?
Okay, so we'll take 5 seconds of prep.
Cool.
Okay, that was 5 more seconds. We're at 105. Good?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, I was just getting paper.
You're good.
Alright.
Okay. So under your model of debate, where I argue about feminism via the topic, I'm advocating for women that are affected by NATO and the Baltic state security, correct?
Not necessarily. Like, can we just do open cross? Because like this is our first time debating a K.
All right, we don't have to, I guess. All right, like,
Okay, cool. So under the TVA, you do not have to you have to give the negative links to the topic, but you can still garner offense. Like you can still read your method, but you have to give the negative team links to the
You
topic.
can garner pre-fiat offense off of something that is topical.
Like for example, last year, like A&M read
Right,
a K.
that's not my question. So I understand the pre-fiat topic, but your argument is that I can only talk about feminism within the lens of the topic.
No. So what? No. So wait. Sorry. Can you repeat that?
So I understand the pre-fiat offense, but my question is, so your topicality shell limits my feminism arguments to the realm of the topic, correct?
Not necessarily. Like you can still. Our argument is you can still talk about how feminism is a thing. Like there's like bad practices in debate, et cetera, but you have to give the negative team links to the topic, i.e. you have to garner offense.
How would I give a link to the topic? Like, I don't understand.
I can give an example, right? For example, on the college topic, Texas read an argument about how the way we decrease alliance commitments is through like hapticality, and it talked about how there's violence in debate and how we can solve that violence, but they linked it back to the topic and said that is the way we break down alliances. So the negative could still go for things like a deterrence dissad, and the app could still go for things like there's violence in debate and our method solves violence outside of alliance commitments, but it still gave negatives links. They still gave the negative team a link to the topic.
Right. Yeah. But their feminism argument doesn't solve for sexism in debate, though.
I'm giving an example about how you can read your method, about how like debate is like structurally unfair while still being under the topic.
Like you can still read a roll of the ballot while still being under the topic, right? Like
that's what you're writing about. The ballot at that point isn't about sexism in debate. It's about sexism in NATO or sexism in the Baltics.
Well, no,
that's not necessarily true. Like I just gave an example about how you could do both, and it would be like a better model debate.
Yeah. I don't really have a question. If you determine on.
Okay, so I mean, at what point do you determine that the risk of commodification of two women running debate outweighs like the benefits of us running the K?
Okay, wait, one thing, right? So you should view this as like a counterplan versus plan debate. You drop.
I'm sorry,
you answer.
Okay,
like you answered commodification, but you didn't answer the counterplan we read above. And our argument is the counterplan solves all of your offense. So even if there's a small risk of commodification, it should outweigh.
Because if I advocate for feminism in the way that you said, well, you can do that as a man too, and that would be commodification.
Well, like
so your plan is
we think that
under our model, no man would ever do that because they wouldn't be able to win the round doing that.
Also,
that is our
also
argument.
At that point, it's just a slippery.
Like a man running FemK probably isn't going to win a round. Like
you'd be surprised. Like
that can happen.
Yeah, that can definitely happen. And our argument is
like
when
our point is that like they'll be able to catch like unprepared people off guard because they're not topical or they're not reading links to the topic. And at that point, like a tech over truth judge will just vote for them because they're like they won off on the flow and they're winning like a roll off the ballot.
But it destroys your method because
that's fine. We're way over. So Sanjay and I are gonna
cool.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Oh, just to clarify, how much prep was that?
We have 7 seconds left.
Like,
Okay, so it's going to start off on the K, and then on the two, like the T and the counter interp, just like sort of like weighing the counter interp over the T, and then the whole like
Wait,
commodification.
Sanj, no, commodification first before.
Is everyone ready? Okay, commodification first.
Sorry.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Can you repeat the order? My bad. My papers are all messed up.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. So it's going to start off on the FemK, and then it's going to be off on the like commodification issue, and then it's going to be weighing our counter interp over your T.
Okay, cool.
Okay, sounds good. Then if everyone is ready, time shall begin on my first word. Okay. Okay. Start from the K, we tell you the debate is structurally skewed against women, and specifically us speaking up about the issue is us doing our form of killjoy because we are breaking down these structures and going against the societal norm of what women should do, which means we're killing the joy in the patriarchal system. And we say that our form of rage is a form of killjoy. That's why we say that the role of the ballot is to vote for the debater who better performatively and methodologically provides a resistance strategy for the oppressed. We tell you we do that through that. Specifically, our voters are first collectivization because by us talking about the issue, it connects us to all the other people and women that deal with the issue in debate. It allows us all to heal and cope together. Second is on defiance because our speech is like pre-fiat disruption of the space where women are oppressed. But then third is on spillover because we have real world implications because we now speak about it in other situations the education that we get from this round spills over into our conversations and how we think about society as a whole. They basically drop this. It's like let's go on to the commodification argument, right? First of all, they tell you that like one risk of commodification is more important. First of all, we tell you that if someone is really commodifying and they don't really know the reading on the topic, they're not going to win the round. The only way you're going to win the round is if you read everything and you understand it. And if they really did understand all of the literature on this issue, that means that they're on net getting more educated on the issue and bringing more awareness to the issue, which means that that's on net better than anything of commodification because they're still spreading awareness and becoming a better person in society. But then second is their form of their entire plan doesn't get rid of commodification because you can still run feminism arguments and things like that. Like they're talking about within the topic and which still is harder to go against than normal arguments, which means that people can still commodify these arguments within the a resolution, which means they're not really solving for anything. Then they say that we concede procedural fairness comes first. We do not concede that. What we tell you is that yes, procedural fairness that fairness still matters sometimes, but we tell you that specifically in this round, structural fairness should matter more because it happens on a more wide scale. Let's go to the T. We tell you that our counter plan, first let me read the counter plan. So our kind of as a debate should be structured around discourse about who best performs structure to resist oppression. Our standard that you should focus on is real world implications because when we talk about these issues in debate, it turns into actually us talking about it in the real world. Not everyone is going to become a policymaker, which means that we don't have to talk about it in the form of a policy making, but rather how a debate affects us. We outweigh for a couple of reasons. First, again, it's this real world implication. They're not actually solving for that. Second is that proximity, we're solving for this sooner because you can actually solve debate issues quicker than you can real world issues with NATO because they're not actually doing anything. Third is on scope because there is still talking about one round where they're unfair, but ours is structural fairness where it's every single round that women are disadvantaged in debate, which means that you should prefer talking about these kind of issues. Fifth is self-advocacy because when you're talking about the plan as in the resolution, we're talking about women that are affected by it overseas, but we're talking about ourselves that are affected by this issue, and we should be able to advocate for ourselves.
Okay, the order is going to be the ballot pick, commodification, T. And it's going to be really quickly on the K first, but
K first, you said?
It's going to be the very the solvency or the voters part of the K, and then ballot pick, commodification, T. Okay, is everyone good? Think back to the voters in their last speech. It connects them with other people. Their speech disrupts debate and has real-world implications. None of these justify the ballot. The ballot pick solves 100% of their offense, and you can extend it. You can endorse the performance and the method of the affirmative, but vote negative. This solves all their offense because they have no solvency deficit as to why the ballot is key, which means if we win even a 1% risk of commodification, you vote for us because we access all their offense. First, they say that people aren't going to read it because they aren't going to win the round. No, this isn't policy. This is PF, where things like critiques are unpredictable. You could read the argument and the other team might even concede because they don't know how to respond to it. That happened in TOC finals, which means that people will read these arguments because they want to win rounds and they think they can win rounds, which is why they will read these arguments. Then they say it'll cause more research. Yes, under a utopian model, this might be the case, but this is not how debate functions. They've conceded that people have the incentive to win. They'll copy paste the doc and read it again. Teams have already done this, taken policy cases, copied them and read them in PF just to win rounds. It's happened. Don't let commodification happen again. Let's make this clear. We're not saying that they're commodifying, but we are saying that the model of debate that they justify encourages commodification. If you can win rounds for simply pointing out that like there's feminism in debate and we disrupt it, then they'll cause people to commodify. The ballot pick solves every other thing on the flow. Don't give them use on. First, they can defend feminism and things in debate, but still defend implementation of the topic, which resolves all of their offense and resolves all of ours, which means that TVA solves all their offense. Then they also conceded switch side debate. You can just read the K on the negative which also resolves all their offense, especially in this round where they could have went negative. You can extend the topicality, show debaters must guard their offense other than the hypothetical implementation of the plan. You can extend the limit standard. Their model of debate explodes limits, and they've conceded the independent psychological violence impact, which comes before all of their K impacts anyway. This argument is really simple. Their model of debate justifies oppression Olympics. As Akil said in summary, one team will come up and say debate is sexist, and we rupture sexism. Some team will say debate is racist, and we rupture racism. Both teams are saying which form of violence is worse. These sort of comparative debates cause oppression Olympics, cause psychological violence, is a more important impact and causes people to leave the activity. Look, the TVA suicide debate solve all their offense. Limits is an independent dissent to not reading the TVA and their counter-interpretation. The ballot pick also solves their offense, which means the risk of commodification outweighs. Now some weighing. They have conceded topicality versus critique weighing. They've conceded that fairness is key to participation, which means that if debate is unfair because teams aren't able to respond to arguments, they will quit, which hijacks the method of their K because it depends on people watching rounds and it depends on people spreading the word, etc. But if debate as an activity doesn't exist, they can't achieve their method, which means if we win a fairness impact, if we win that they explode limits, make debate impossible because people can't effectively prepare, it means that people will not participate in the activity. The activity will cease to exist. All this was conceded. They can't garner offense of a method that relies on debate as an activity existing. Look, you can vote on the ballot pick. First of all, don't give them any new responses because in their own case, they justified you have to respond to things in the next speech. The things like TVA, switch side debate, ballot pick were all just clean dropped on the flow. Don't give them new responses.
Are y'all comfortable with taking like 30 seconds of prep instead of grand? Since we're going
Yeah. Wait, like you mean like we can add the 30 seconds before our final focus, right? Or like right now? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Order is going to be K, and then extending the CI and weighing. Or I'll weigh the K and then go on to the CI. Is everyone good? Okay. And we'll begin on my first word. Starting off, you can extend the K, get it to a knee, find the debate is structurally skewed against women. Specifically, Ahmed finds that when we speak up against it, it's a form of liberation. Capital finds that this killjoy is a form of defiance because now we are not allowing men to exist in this happy system. And that's why Vincent finds that the role of the ballot is to vote for the team that best performatively and methodologically provides a resistance strategy for the oppressed. They don't ever respond to the role of the ballot, and their plan, topicality, isn't the role of the ballot. The only offense that falls under the role of the ballot is our offense. We isolate three impacts versus collectivization because this is an act of solidarity. Second is defiance because once we start speaking up against sexism, it starts bringing more awareness to the issue, and it's impossible for people to continue going the same way. And third is on a real world applicability, because we all become policymakers one day, and it's better for us to know how policy is impacted by women. They continue extending this commodification argument, but no one wins commodification in this round, because they can see that their topicality plan also allows for commodification, because I can still read feminism under the frame of the lens and under the frame of the topic, and that is still commodifying women's experiences. No one wins commodification in this round. At best, it's a wash. You vote on the K and the roll of the bell. But then second is that they tell you that like you can just endorse the plan without voting for it. That doesn't mean anything. Like, how are you endorsing feminism without voting for it? The minute that you vote for the ballot, it tells women that your struggles are important to us, your issues are important to us, your voice is important to us. The best way for you to endorse the plan, tell women that they matter, is by affirming. And then they say that PF is unpredictable and team conceded in TOC. Yeah, if they wanted to concede it, that would probably be better, because once the team conceded in TOC, they had an hour-long discussion about how queer people are affected in debate, and that is so much more educational than us just going back and forth talking about topicality. Unfortunately, most people aren't willing to concede that that's probably a better model anyways. Then let's weigh the K over over their argument. They say that fairness is key participation, but we impacted participation the most because structural fairness is on that happening in every single round and excludes all women from debate, whereas their argument procedural fairness is just limited to one debate, and it's better for us to prioritize structural fairness first. But then you can extend the counterinterpretation. Counterinterpretation is that debate should be structured around discourse about who best forms structures to resist the oppression we meet, because we're structured and the standard is real world applicability. This outweighs oppression limits, whereas one oppression limit only happens sometimes. It's empirically disproven. Aldean policy doesn't happen in the second. It outweighs a K overall because it is about self-advocacy and proximity. I can better solve for sexism in debate than I can solve for sexism at NATO.
Okay, so we have the 30. Oh, mute.
No, you got it. You got it. No, you just said.
Oh, okay. We have the 30 plus the 24, so 54 seconds of prep. Yeah. Okay, cool. We'll raise our hands.
Cool. The order is going to be T, then the weighing. Cool.
They didn't answer the question.
Our interpretation is that you must garner offense off of the hypothetical implementation of the affirmative, which they definitely did not do. They read a non-topical version of the affirmative. This is really, really important because they also can see the topical version of the app. You should draw the line. It hasn't been responded to a single time. You should draw the line. We see that they could have advocated for women and sexism through the topic. They could have talked about sexism in NATO offices or what happens with it to women when NATO troops are deployed. And they also conceded switch side debate, which ends the round there. They could have just read okay, so we won the flip and we flipped second. They had the choice to pick between AF or neg, and they chose to go AF. They could have just gone neg and read a critique on NATO, which also links into their structural fairness weighing, which is the only way they can win. They could have just read the critique on the negative side and talked about why NATO is a bad actor, which means that they could have linked to all their structural fairness stuff, which means that they don't have a patch to the bell because they made the wrong choice and could have just gone negative. The switch side debate thing is conceded. Remember, the TVA and the switch side debate solved back for the entirety of the counterinterpretation. The parts that they've said on the flow of T has just been extending their counterinterpretation, but the TVA and the switch side debate solved back for that. What their counterinterpretation cannot solve back for, and the independent dissent off of it, is the limits argument that we have extended in every single one of our speeches. What we say is that in a world where people can just read non-topical affirmatives that don't have links to the topic, it explodes limits because now it creates a race to the bottom and oppression Olympics where one person can up and say that, hey, debate is sexist, which is why you should vote for us, and then the other person says debate is racist, which is why you should vote for us, and you can't decide who is actually going to win the round. And more importantly, that compound psychological violence that now leads to, which definitely outweighs, because now leads to more psychological violence, which definitely outweighs your critique. Look, then, on the weighing, hold them to what they said in first constructive. The end of what they said is that you should let we should have to respond to the roll of the ballot, otherwise it kills fairness and it calls it times two. That itself is a concession as to why structural procedural fairness comes first, and we're going to extend that. It proves that fairness controls the best internal linkage to participation of the activity. That's really, really important, because the implication is that there's no one participating in the activity because it's something that they have done is inherently not inclusive. It means that they can't have a place where they can actually advocate for their case, which means that if we're winning a link into inclusion, i.e. the limits argument that I extended above, we're winning this round because they're functionally making it so people can participate in debate. Even then, they can't solve back for all structural framing. Switch side debate solves back for structural fairness. They could have shared the K and the neg. Thank you. All right, good round, y'all.
Good round, y'all.